Okay, P7, thank you. We're looking at our second lesson this week. If you remember yesterday, we were working with decimal numbers and we were trying to find out the number that came before a given decimal number. And different groups are working in different amounts. So the hexagons, pentagons had to work in thousands yesterday. Squares and triangles had to work in the hundredths, and circles were working in the tenths column. Now today's task is very, very similar. In today's task, we're doing, I suppose what you would say, the opposite. We're trying to find the number that comes after a given number. So we're adding, we're increasing the number. And we're going to increase it in the thousandths column if you're hexagons and pentagons. You're going to increase it in the hundredths column if you're in squares and triangles. And we're going to increase it in the tenths column if you're a circle. So like I said, it's extremely similar to yesterday's lesson, except we're working in the other direction. We're increasing our numbers. Okay, our numbers are going to get bigger. So if we go to our trusty place value chart, if I was to put, for example, a very simple number, 5.6, okay, this has 5 units or 5 ones, which is how it's often shown, and 6 tenths. If we work in a circles group today, we're going to increase the tenths column. We're going to find the number that comes next or comes after when we're counting in tenths. We're not going to increase the ones or the units at all. We're just going to increase the tenths. So we're still going to have 5 in the units, but this time we're going to add 1/10 to the 6. So 6 tenths plus 1/10 is, of course, 7 tenths. Okay, so yesterday we were subtracting from this column circles group. Today we're adding 1/10. Okay, so if you look at your task, we choose one at random. Let's look at this first, the second one here, 189.1. So this number has 1 in the hundreds column, 8 in the tens, 9 in the units or the ones, and then just 1 in the tenths column. So if we're going to find the number that comes after when you count in tenths, because that's your task today, all you have to do is add 1 to this column. Okay, so this is the units column. Previously it was, sorry, this is the tenths column. Previously it was 1/10. It now becomes 2/10. Okay, so that's very straightforward. If we look maybe perhaps down here, this one says 993.8. That has 9 hundredths, 9 tenths, and 3 units, and then 8 tenths. If we find the number after, when you count in tenths, we don't have to increase any of these digits to the left of the decimal point. We just increase the 8 by 1, or the 8 tenths, sorry, by 1/10. Will get you to 9. Okay. Now there are 1 or 2 to look out for, as we had in the previous lesson. For example, 5.9 plus 1/10. A lot of children would do this. They would write 5.91. But actually you haven't added a tenth there. You've added, actually done something more complicated, and you've actually added a hundredth. So what you need to do is add 1 to the tens column. Add 1/10 to the tenths column, sorry. Okay, so 5.9 plus 0.1 rolls over, doesn't it? So this can't become a 10. So what you have to do is leave it as a 0 and put a whole number on this side. Okay, you might find something similar here. 94.9 plus 1/10 will give you a whole number, and something similar in 1 or 2 other sums. For example, here, and down here as well. So be careful for those. Let's look at another example here. 122.6. So 122.6. You're finding the number after when you count in tenths. All you're doing is adding 1/10 in the tenths column. So 6 plus 1, or 6/10 plus 1/10 becomes 7 tenths. Okay. Squares and triangles group. Very similar again to yesterday's. You're finding the number after when you count in hundredths. So we're not working in the same column as circles. We're working here in the hundredths column. Okay, so let's look at an example on our lovely place value grid. So on our place value grid, if for example I put the 6 here, the number I'm working with now is 5.76. So I have 5 ones, 7 tenths, and 6 hundredths. If I'm going to add 100th, if I'm going to find the number that comes next when I'm going up in hundredths, I don't need to do anything with the tenths. The tenths can stay exactly the same. I don't need to do anything at all with my units or my ones. But I do have to increase my hundredths column. So 6 plus 1, or 6 hundredths plus 100th is 7. Basic addition, 5.77. Okay. Remember, we're adding, we're increasing our numbers this week. If we're in circles, we're increasing the tenths column. If we're in squares and triangles, we're working in the hundredths column. Let's go back to our activity circles. Very straightforward. The first one, 3.33. So 3 units, 3 tenths, 3 hundredths. But we need to find the number that comes after 3.33 when you count in hundredths. So we're just going to increase this column here, the hundredths column, by 1. 3 plus 1 is 4. 3 hundredths plus 1 hundredth, 3.34. Maybe we'll go down here. We'll look at this one, 940.95. Find the number that comes after. Remember, we're doing after today, not before. And we're going to count in hundredths. So this is the hundredths column. 5 hundredths plus 1 hundredth is 6 hundredths. So you need to work through all of these, add in the number to the left, to the right hand side, in the box to the right hand side. Now be careful, 3.99. That could be a challenging one. 5,995.39. That could be a challenging one. Remember to think about money when you're working with hundredths, because that's how the money system works. So £3.99 plus 1p would of course be £4. So when you add 1 hundredth to 3.99, it will be 4.00. But you don't have to obviously have the 2 zeros on the screen. That's an acceptable answer. Fantastic. So that's squares and triangles work. You're working to add or to find the number that comes after when you count in hundredths. Hexagons and pentagons, exactly the same process. Instead, you're looking in the thousandths column. And not like yesterday where you were subtracting when you were finding number 4. Today you're finding the number after. Okay, so let's again look at our second place value grid. And if we had the number perhaps 34.696, we're finding the number that comes after 34.696. So we're not going to change anything at all in the tens or the ones. The tens and the units are going to remain exactly the same. The tenths, again, the same. The hundredths, the same. We are going to have to add 1 in the thousandths column. So 6 thousandths plus 1 thousandths becomes 7 thousandths. Okay, because in hexagons and pentagons group, you're finding what comes after a given decimal number when you're counting in thousands. That's the third space after the decimal point. So let's look at your activity. Very simple stuff to begin with. How about this one for an example? 132.111, 132.111. And this number there is 1 tenth, 1 hundredth, and 1 thousandth. Remember, we're finding the number that comes next when you count in thousands. So this column needs to be increased just by 1. 1 thousandth plus 1 thousandth is 2 thousandths. Let's look at this number, 2.183. So 2.183 has 2 units or 2 ones. It has a tenth, 8 hundredths, and 3 thousandths. We're going to increase the thousandth by 1 to get 2.184. Okay. As previously, there's 1 or 2 examples that might be tricky. For example, here, what happens when you add 1 to 999 becomes 1,000. So how does that affect this side of the number? This one, you might be tempted to write this, 94950001. I've seen that answer before. That wouldn't be correct. I've also seen this answer before. The answer is somewhere between that. Okay. And then the last one I want you to look at, is there any other ones? This is an interesting one. 49.050. You're going to add 1,000 here. Okay, don't be fooled because there's a 0 here or there's a 9 here. That's what you need to increase. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense, P7. I appreciate it's a bit tricky. There are some there that me and Mrs. McKay were putting deliberately to challenge you. Hopefully you'll get there. Okay, thanks for listening. Good luck.